Hello, everyone. Welcome to the fifth discussion of The Warrior Prophet, which is the second book in the Prince of Nothing trilogy by R. Scott Bakker. We are reading this book about 100 pages every week and meeting up to discuss it once again every week. If you'd like to join us for these discussions, either here in the group or on the forum, consider joining the PageChewing forum. I assume after we finish this book, we are scheduled to finish it next week. We will pick up the next book right away, which is The Thousandfold Thought. Yeah. If you've just been listening along with us, thank you so much for listening and all your wonderful comments. With me, I have the usual group of friends. Steve, would you like to start us off with introductions?
Sure. My name is Steve, and this is my second time reading The Warrior Prophet, and yeah, I'm excited to hear what everyone's thoughts are. We'll get into it, I'm sure. But there's long stretches of things, and then there's like little tidbits dropped in. So yeah. So I don't, yeah. So I do post for those of you listening or watching that you have read the series. I do have a thread on the forums that we post reread observations on. So full spoilers, and there's a couple of things that I'm adding to that thread after these few chapters. So just saying.
Okay.
Interesting.
Maybe you can allude to them in cryptic ways during the podcast.
Yes, I will.
Okay.
Carl and I will be scratching our heads trying to figure out what the heck you guys mean.
Good.
Dan, you
go.
Oh, sure. Yeah, I'm Dan. I'm a reader of books and a talker of words and a commenter of books, I guess. But that's it. Nothing else. Go ahead, Carl.
And I am Carl D. Albert. I am an epic fantasy author and I'm a proud member of the PageChewing forum. Very happy to be here, discussing this. This is my first time reading through the series, and I'm really enjoying it. Particularly book 2 has really been a hit with me.
Nice. Dan, we've got to put talker of words on a t-shirt.
All of my social media bios for the longest time have included writer of words. So I think that's maybe the next level. You go from writer of words to talker of words.
Yes. Thinker of thoughts and all the good stuff.
Exactly. See, I'm nowhere near that level, though. That's the thing. Is thinker of thoughts? That's a little too complicated for me. Maybe I'll figure out the gnosis, and that'll help.
I wish you luck.
Walk the shortest path.
Yeah, exactly.
The shortest path.
Or don't.
So I'm just going to say again, I told you guys before we started, but I don't have my book in front of me. So I don't exactly remember where we start and stop, because like reading these every week now, things are starting to blur together in my brain. So I guess, Varsha, if you're leading things, definitely, take charge in kind of describing any event we're talking about. Because I will remember once you say it, because I remember this being very memorable. The main thing I remember was the thing I hoped for last week with Acamian. But beyond that, I don't distinctly remember where things ended. I just remember thinking it was really cool. Yeah.
Yeah, I think the first chapter is where that's pretty much the main thing that happens here. I guess Survey has her baby, and that's
Right.
it. We stop after the baby's born.
Which chapter was that? Sorry, before and also for everyone following.
We're discussing chapters
18 through 21.
Yeah, that. Well, I forgot to say that in the intro. Today we're talking about 18 through 21.
Shame.
It's fine. I'm hungry.
That's always a worthy excuse.
So Survey has a baby, which I think happens the chapter after this one. And then Callus meets a Scissorim dude who has apparently been taught the logos, or at least parts of it, by Moengus. And I And then the consult, the weird crow person, we get some POV of his too, where he wants to destroy Callus. Oh, Callus has some assassination attempts on him, and he destroys all the consult people that he encounters as part of that. And he, yeah, and we get a POV from the crow human face thing, the synthes, that it wanted to couple with Callus whenever they managed to kill him. I assume that means take on the face of Callus, or some other strange thing that console people do to the people they
Well, the term
pair with.
couple in this case would imply having sex with.
I thought so
Yeah.
too. I wasn't sure. I wasn't sure which meaning it was. It
Maybe both, right?
yeah. Oh god.
I mean, knowing these skin spies, probably both.
Yeah.
We know how to party, so we'll see.
Yeah, that's a way to put it.
And then we had some going on with Nair and Proyas, which I had a brief moment of confusion that I'd like to talk about. But anyway, Proyas apparently is sick. The Holy War is dealing with a lot of diseases, which, you know, what the hell else did you expect? And with 300,000 people. And yeah, I think that was pretty much it.
I do remember one other thing. Saban got,
Yeah.
I think Saban is the right name. Saban got Proyas to agree to support his bid to be in charge of whatever city they were besieging.
Karakatsikistan.
Karaskand.
Karskand. Yeah, that's right. Karskand. Which is interesting because this, if you're okay starting with this, I believe is sort of an attempted parallel of what happens in Antioch, and you start seeing these establishment of Crusader states in the First Crusade. And you had one of the sort of leading princes kind of peel away from the crusade and stop and just like take over Antioch after they had besieged it, which is interesting because I assumed Osgiliac, I think, was the name or something like that. The early battle, I just assumed because the name, and because Antioch was one of the earlier battles in the First Crusade, that like that was going to be the stand-in, and that they just skipped the taking it over. But apparently not. Apparently we went around. It definitely doesn't map perfectly onto the First Crusade, I've noticed. Like they go through Egypt, which didn't really happen in the First Crusade, as opposed to just going through. I do believe Judea, you know, in the real world, is sort of maps onto Gidea, I think is the name of it in the books. I could be wrong, but again, just the naming makes me think. But yeah, anyway, that was my little historical anecdote for the day. And so I was intrigued by that Saban seems to be finally peeling away and establishing his own little principality.
I guess that's what he wanted, right?
Mm-hmm.
So he's going to be happy now.
He had clearly had a lot of insecurity about like he wanted to be one of these like really high lords and, you know, felt disrespected. And so this is his way of like kind of making that happen. He's someone I do find intriguing and interesting to follow, particularly because like, I don't know, I didn't expect to get so much of him. He kind of just like really entered the story in full force, like a third of the way through this book, and has had some interesting sections. You know, he still had, it was really his POV we got when we were on whatever the big battlefield where the no god died.
Was it Manigata? Yeah.
Where he had the whole out of body experience, which we later told several people also did, but maybe this one was slightly different than the others. Do we think, like, I was slightly unclear on that, was Callus going to allow that to happen? No, Callus was the one who presumably gave Sabon the I guess his blessing to go demand the kingship of this city. But did it seem like Proyas was going to actually agree with him, like that he was going to fulfill his promise? I kind of got the impression towards the end there that he was going to not follow through on his agreement, or was it, or at least I got the sense that Sabon wasn't going to get what he wanted. Was it because Confus was going to interfere? I feel like something was getting ready to fall apart there for Sabon, but I can't remember what.
Confus wasn't happy about it, if I remember right. I mean, that's the big thing. Confus, he's all like, this is all Mansuri land. It should belong to all of them. They're reclaiming it. On top of that, I mean, he's the one who's, pushing the assassination of Callus. One of the ones pushing the assassination of Callus, right?
Yeah. He plots with Sarcellus to kill Callus, and they fail miserably at it, as we see later on.
I feel bad for Compass. He's just like, all his carefully laid plans all the time. He seems so smart, everything planned, and it never goes his way because of these, Callus and other meddling people.
I have no sympathy for. I don't know why. I can't explain why I like Proyas, who also sucks, and not Confus. Confus, I'm like, okay, I hate Callus too, but like, for some reason, I don't root for him. Like, I guess I just find the Nansuri so annoying.
Oh, you know? Okay.
I think it's just all of them. Like, I not just all of them, but that family. I think I just like find them so comically inept, and Confus isn't even inept. Like, he's clearly a very skilled general, but I don't know.
I like his arrogance, but Proyas comes from it. Like, I think we've seen, like, he comes from a place of good, I guess, or he wants to do good, right? Well, Confus, he's doing it for his own, for himself. He's not trying to do it. He doesn't lie to himself for what he's doing. Like, he doesn't, he's doing it just for himself, right?
Right. I think, I think that's it, is that I do feel like Proyas has, like, he's a zealot, but he has a slightly better heart, I feel like. And he also has more inner turmoil about it all. He's more conflicted, which I think makes him more interesting. Or at least more sympathetic, where I'm like, I'm instantly like, okay, I get, like, this guy at least is like questioning, the bad things he's doing, as opposed to Confus, who's just like, I mean, it's been bred into him, right? They all are just like so full of themselves. But it is fun. I mean, I'm so glad we have a character like Confus in the Holy War, just constantly grappling, and trying to kill Callus.
Yeah, I agree. I think Proyas has a certain sincerity to him that Confus completely lacks. I think there was even a little bit of a Confus POV monologue in which he looked down upon the cause of the Holy War. So he's just in it completely for his own purposes. He's not even pretending to be along for the religious reasons. But Proyas is only there for the religious zealotry, which makes him unlikable in other ways. But just in terms of sincerity, I think he's pretty likable. Minus the part where he completely ill-treated Akamian, but
I mean, it's understandable, right?
yeah.
And I think it's like he wants to be a zealot, but he doesn't, like, he has too much conflict. Like, he doesn't want to have a conflict, but then he has it, which makes it a bit more interesting, right?
Yeah. Oh yeah, I guess he strives for the lack of doubt, but then since he I guess he cannot not doubt, maybe because of the values that Akambir instilled in him. So maybe he dislikes, maybe he perceives that as lack of sincerity in his religion, maybe. But maybe that's why he feels the need to keep justifying his belief or keep reasserting the strength of his faith. That makes sense.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think that absolutely plays a part in it.
Yeah. I like that interpretation. That's really cool.
Yeah. What do you think of Sabon's faith? Do you think he's a extremist, is a fanatic, or what do you think about him?
I mean, he's willing to sort of, I don't know, it is fanaticism, but given where he's willing to place the belief, I suppose He believes that Kellis is this prophet or someone who can give him what he wants, right? But he was also starting to doubt him when the bad things happen in that first battlefield. So it feels opportunistic, his faith.
Okay.
But
I agree.
yeah.
I mean, I think by a lot of particularly sort of like modern standards, we'd still think of him as a zealot. But I do think his faith is really opportunistic. I don't think that there's a sincerity to it like there is to Proyas, who genuinely is doing what he thinks the gods want, versus, Saban, who's like, it's all an excuse really for him for his pursuit of power. And I don't think he's even fully aware of that. I don't think he consciously is thinking about that, but his insecurity clearly motivates so much of his actions and his I mean, you just see it. That's the whole thing, right? With him taking Coruscant, is it was like he just wanted to feel big. And this was his opportunity for that. And maybe it advances, the whims of the Holy War, but that's not really deep down why he's doing it.
Yeah, I do feel like he's and honestly I can't say that there's enough that we've read so far to support this claim, but I think he's cherry picking what he believes in, and based on based on whether or not it will give him the outcome that he wants. Kind of like with superstitions, right? You have a superstition, and then you cherry pick all the data to support that superstition and ignore all the ones that don't. So
Well,
um,
I think I agree with you, first of all, but I also think it's worth saying that like that's something that everyone does,
yeah,
right? Like different people do it to different degrees, but like whether you have any type of like faith in anything, you create kind of your excuses to justify your own values, essentially, right? Wherever those values come from, like for this case, because we're talking about organized religions, like you look in real life, like people often don't, like often these base texts, these holy books have contradictory, paradoxical values imposed in them. And so, theologians grapple with that. And that's why we have theologians. But on top of that, like day players, people who are just there to like worship and maybe find some inner peace, some hope, or, some direction for their life, whatever motivates people in their faiths, will cherry pick, right? And I mean, I think you're absolutely right that Saban is doing that. I think Proyas is probably doing that, although I think he actually probably does like read the Tusk. Like Proyas feels like the type of person who's read it like cover to cover, whatever version they have written down, right, of the Tusk's writings. And while like Saban, like no chance, like this dude, no. He's like, he's read a few passages and he's like, okay, I get the gist. Like, let's go kill some heathens.
Yeah, it's probably like reading is for women or some, or like
Exactly.
weaklings or something, right?
Yeah. No, women can't read. It's
Yeah,
certainly not
not
for
in this
women.
case.
Yeah.
It's for wizards or something.
Yeah, exactly. Reading is for heretics.
So what's your assessment of Saban so far, Steve?
Well, it was a running joke on the first read that it was Katarina's least favorite character. She's always rooting for him to die.
Fair.
But she hated him. But so it was like a running joke. But he is. I didn't remember how involved he was, but on the reread, I'm remembering like how much he actually did. But he's kind of a scumbag, right? I mean, he's kind of like you said, he's like an opportunist, and he's not I guess, like a true believer. He's out for himself, but it does make for an interesting character. I still think he's an interesting character. But in a book like this, it's like, how many characters do you really like? Like how many characters you root for? So he fits in. I mean, he's it's not like he's standing out. He's just one of many who are scumbags.
I'm really glad, again, from a personal like dramatic desire for drama, but also like from that sort of, you know, kind of fan of the history of the period, that we're finally having kind of the establishment of these crusader states, because that is such an interesting aspect of that like period, that, you know, these groups like peel off and like essentially set up like colonies, you know, build up their own kingdom, and they're surrounded essentially by who they view as like the enemy, right? It's like, it's just rife for drama. And again, I'm holding on to my theory that Kellis is going to become king of Shime. I'm not looking at the two just because I don't want to see any reactions. That's one of my big theories right now. And I'm just glad this is happening, because I think it's a really interesting political situation that's rife to kind of, I mean, it was full of drama in real life, and I think it would be full of drama, you know, here. And with the inclusion of the consult, no less, like, does the consult want these crusader states to be established, right? They support the Holy War. Or do they want, you know, these little mini kingdoms, principalities all over the place? We'll see.
So do you think there's going to be some sort of kingdom of Jerusalem, some kingdom of Shime or something?
I feel like there will be, because to me that's like the most important outcome of the First Crusade. And so if you're going to base any war on it, it seems strange to me that you don't include that at the end. Now that said, maybe it won't be Kellis, but I just feel like Kellis, given that he is this like prophet, seems perfectly suited, and he's like has a reason to go to Shime personally. He's perfectly suited to like set up and take over there, and then, you know, maybe try to expand from there. I don't know, but I just feel like that's, I don't know, it's an idea that occurred to me in the last, like, I don't know, during this book, and I think there's a lot of potential to it and would be interesting, I think, but we'll see.
We'll see.
A lot of story to go.
On that note, has Kellis started implying that he is the son of God? Because I mean, he's talking to his father, who we know of as Moengus, but he's also telling people that this is what his father's asking him to do and so on. Has he told people before that he got dreams about Shime from his father, or he just said that he dreamed of the Holy War in Shime, right?
Yeah.
And now he's, I think, was it to Esmenet or somebody else? And even before that, it was, first it was, "I'm coming, father, I'm coming," on the way, like, which of course we know who he meant, but everybody else, I believe, is supposed to think maybe God. And then there was a conversation with Esmenet in which I think it was Esmenet, in which he outright said, "My father says this." So
yeah, I don't even think it's implication. I think that's like he's like being like, I'm the son of God now.
yeah,
He's going full like Jesus Christ. Like he that's his thing now. And I honestly, I can't believe his audacity. This dude tried to like, we knew it was fake, but he was like very successfully feigning humility for so long. And now he's just like, he's not just like, yeah, I'm a prophet. He's like, yeah, I'm the son of God. It's like, it's crazy. This is crazy to me.
Well, he's still technically saying that his father is God, right?
Yeah.
He's making everyone else think it, but he's not technically saying it.
I mean, I guess maybe he hasn't, I don't know if he's outright said it or not, but certainly he's like, the way it just seems crazy to me.
Heavily implied, yes.
Yes. Well, yeah, very heavily. And yeah.
And it's fun for us because we're like, you're technically telling the truth, I guess, but in a very misleading way, just like almost everything he does. He's technically saying the truth, but in a very misleading way to purposely deceive people, right?
Right. His relationship with Moengus is still such a question mark for me. Like I feel like it was in this section we finally got, he's actually very seriously thinking about killing Moengus. Like I know he said that to Nair, but like I wish that would have been more clear in book 1 that he was going with the intentions to kill Moengus. Like he said that to Nair, but I don't think he ever thought it actively, or specifically that's what the other, I forget what they're called, but like the heads of the Dunyain told him to do. Yeah. Because in the prologue, it does not say he was sent out to kill his dad. Like that isn't stated. And so I was just a little gripe that I wish that would have been clarified, because I just assumed he was lying. And I'm sure he feels like conflict over it, and he's going to wait to see, what his father's deal is. But I had spent this entire time not thinking that was actually his intentions and that he was just lying to Nair. But it turns out, yeah, again, it was, he's telling the truth, if not the whole truth, right? And I don't know.
But I mean, why does he want to kill him, right?
Apparently because he was told to. But beyond that, yeah.
But why do they want to kill him? Right?
He's a secret.
We're being, how do I say, like drip-fed this information, right? We're not being told all the time. I don't know. I think that's the way he wants it to be. Like, oh, you don't know everything. You're slowly uncovering the reasons why things happen. But
yeah, I don't need the why so much as I just needed his like that direct motivation, because I don't feel like we lose anything by that. It was so ambiguous. I mean, I remember talking through The Darkness That Comes Before, and Mike, Varsha, and I were all just like, what is his deal? Like, what is he actually? Does he actually want to go? Like, why? What's going on with Kellis? We know he's going to Shime seeking his father, but does he want to kill him? Does he want to talk to him? Like, what, And again, like, there's still the ambiguity, even knowing he's going with the order to kill his dad, that like maybe that's not what he's going to do. And clearly he wants information. He wants to know what his dad is doing. But I just feel like we wouldn't have lost anything if it was like, all it takes is literally a single line. Like the line we got here, that like, whatever the few or however he describes the Dunyain like top people, gave him this order. And because I just feel like, I don't know, again, this is a tiny thing, like it really isn't that big a deal, but it was just something where like I read it and I was like, oh, so it is that straightforward. Okay. Like again, there's still the ambiguity, right? Like Kellis is going to do what Kellis does, and I'm sure he's not positive, but like that he was given an order, I feel like didn't needed to be held back this long.
I think it makes it so that the reader is also second guessing the reason, like second guessing about Kellis, because everyone else is also like you never know what Kellis is thinking, what he's doing, what his actual final motive is, right? But it's hard to do it, I guess, if you're reading the book and you're not there. You know what I mean?
Sure.
It's maybe trying to put the reader in more like what the characters might be thinking, or what their what their reaction to Kellis might be or something.
I mean, Bakker's clearly was straddling a line here, right? Because he wants you to have an opinion of Kellis, like, or specifically, he wants you to be aware that Kellis is lying out of his ass and is manipulating all these people,
Yes.
Like he makes that very clear with, like, we've gotten the Dunyain flashbacks. I remember actually reading an interview he wrote about the Warrior Prophet where like he added some of those in later drafts because it wasn't clear enough early on that Kellis should not be trusted. And I fell down a whole rabbit hole. I like made sure to avoid spoilers, but just with in the books we'd read. And so like he wants you to be aware of that as the reader.
Yeah.
But obviously he still wants to create a level of ambiguity. And it is a difficult, line to walk. And I think generally he's done a really great job. This just one thing just annoyed me. But I don't know. I don't know if Varsha feels similarly or different. But or Mike for that matter. I don't know where Mike is, but yeah.
Yeah. I think he wants us to think like, should I be rooting for Kellis or not? And if you don't know what he's trying to do, you're like, oh, is he doing the bad thing for a good reason, or is he doing a bad thing for a bad reason? You're like, I don't know who to support. But he could have said that.
And just for me, the more interesting question is killing Moingus the right thing than what is Kellis doing? Like I'd rather grapple with like the possibility of an action and the morality of that. Like we see him generally, right? Like, we're confronted with like, well, is Kellis ultimately here the person we should be rooting for over like the consult, for example, right? Like, I don't know. And that to me is the more interesting question, right? But we'll see. Anyway, sorry, I've talked a lot. Varsha, what are your thoughts?
I think for me, knowing that he was definitely sent to kill, whether or not he intends to follow through on it, is not a whole lot of additional information for me. Because one, I think I care more about why, which would tell us more about the Dunyain and why they would want to send someone out to kill a person who's apparently they haven't seen for 30 years and presumably don't know anything about what he's been up to. Um, at least that's what it seems like, because Kellis was surprised at some point to learn about sorcery and had concluded that since he was sent dreams by his father that he had learned how to do sorcery. Or was that the reason why they sent him out, because he had learned, he had become a sorcerer now. But anyway, even that doesn't tell us anything about why they would want to kill this person. And we don't know much about Moengus other than how he manipulated um, Nair. It is possible that they want to keep their secrecy and they got some information from the dreams that they want to, um, that he's been spreading the logos. Like we found out for a fact that he did in these chapters. It's possible that they don't like that, and because we know how Kellis kills people off after telling them that he's Dunian, right? So maybe it's the secrecy they care about. But just knowing that they definitely want to kill him is it did not give me a whole lot of additional information, because there's still the why, and also the ambiguity, like you said, Carl, about like he may or may not follow through. He's probably going to do his own analysis and decide whether to follow through with it, especially given the way he talks to, like, he keeps does anyone else after reading the series go, what does this mean, father, when they're thinking to themselves? I do that.
That's amazing. Yeah.
But the way he talks to him, maybe maybe the Dunyan don't have feelings for other people, or like don't have emotions or family bonds and so on. But from the way Kellis thinks about his father, like at least in terms of what does this mean, what have you sent me to do, etc., etc., it does feel like there's some sort of emotional bond there that he may have to struggle against, especially with what happened with Nair. So, for one reason or another, he may or may not follow through with it. So, overall, I don't feel like I have more information than I had before. Um, but that's just me. Like, it's perfectly, yeah.
And we know his hand can be stayed by emotion. He's not
Mhm.
perfect, right?
Right. Yeah.
He spared Nair when he should not have.
Right.
I
Yeah.
mean, thank goodness for that, because the story is richer for having Nair in it. And I was not ready to be done with him yet. I want him to cause more chaos. He's weirdly like growing too. And in a series like this, I keep waiting for the like he's gonna turn again and become like worse than ever or something. But I feel like he's like actually maturing as a person, which is very compelling and strange to watch. Anyway, that was just a side thing. But Kellis, I'm curious. I'm going to not look at the others because I don't want to get the reaction. Do you think that they are that the Dunyan are so secret because they were like almost wiped out, and that like this is some sort of like self-defense thing for them, that they want to stay in their little holes? Do you think it's because they have larger plans for the world? Like, what are your thoughts, Varsha, there?
Yeah, wiped out. That's interesting, isn't it? The consult, they don't seem to remember who they are, or I
No.
don't think it's, oh, these guys again, we need to go kill them. But they did come and hide in the prologue of the first book. Like they found this nice cute hidey hole, but it didn't feel, I didn't get the impression that they were running from anything, at least from the perspectives we got in the prologue.
Well, they're
So
refugees. So I mean, they're like
oh,
explicitly refugees. So in that sense, they are running. We just don't know what exactly, but presumably the
I see.
apocalypse in some way.
In that case, then yeah, it's possible they are hiding from persecution, but also, yeah, honestly, I don't have an answer. I can't say that I've thought about it too much. It does. Yeah, why do they not want the logos to spread? Why do they want it to keep
Right.
it a secret? It seems very similar to how the mandate wants to keep the gnosis secret. Except we know exactly how powerful the gnosis is, and also it's a source of power for the mandate schoolmen, right? They get to be these schoolmen that people laugh at, but also get some intense respect for because they wield the gnosis. So
And we see why here, right? Like
yeah.
they are different. I mean, we've learned more about their magic and why it's different, which that's drip feeding I've really liked, is getting just gradually more and more info about how the magic works here. I mean, that they use the words of like the primal, like words of creation or something. And like, oh man, if you're ready to move on from Kellis, I'm happy to jump into it. Finally getting exactly what I was hoping for. I had a gut feeling, and the gut feeling was actually accurate this time. It was, I knew Akemi was just going to go off.
Our friend Mike, he wasn't able to make it tonight, but he did drop us a note and ask that. He said, "Please talk about how Akemian kicked some Scarlet Skyre's butts in chapter 19."
There you go. We miss you, Mike. I'm so glad you also felt the need to talk about that. It was great. I mean, Akemian, not only being one of the more likable characters, but also just like, because he is kind of like pitiful at times, like he's kind of pathetic. When he goes off and you see what he's capable of, it's so satisfying, especially these Scarlet Spires guys were freaking asking for it, like torturing him, you know, torturing Zen, who's also a relatively decent person. Like, oh man. I mean, it shouldn't be torturing anyone, but like, especially these two guys, it's like, oh, it was so satisfying. The moment where like the seal broke, I was like, there we go. This is it. It was so good. So good.
I think the Scarlet Spires were also like, you know, it's like that moment in movies when they captures, you know, they capture someone and then something happens and they turn and they're like, oh shit, he's free, right?
Yeah.
They knew they were fucked up.
It was such a cinematic moment. Like I could see it filmed in my head. Like that's one of those moments that like, if this ever, you know, I think this is probably too niche and like maybe too dark to ever actually get made. But if it did get adapted, this would be one of the moments that like, it's just so perfectly set up for like a movie or TV show. Like you can just see the cuts and like, it's so good.
Yeah.
And the freaking little doll came back. I didn't. That was a great payoff. I didn't actually expect that. But that was delightful. A creepy little doll.
Is that it? Sorry.
The orange tabby too.
Oh.
Yeah, that's right.
What was the orange tabby's thing?
It's just a street cat.
Did we see it before? Okay.
Got killed.
Interesting.
The doll. We got its POV, which was so random.
Yeah.
I mean, we know why, but I just remember reading that and be like, are we reading from a cat's POV? Like, what?
Are these weird marionette / doll things a D&D thing? Because Malazan has one of those, and yeah.
Are they?
I don't know. I played a lot of D&D, and I don't remember any living dolls, but that definitely sounds like something that would exist.
Sounds like a voodoo thing or something, right?
I dig it. It's an idea. I loved it in Malazan. I love it here. I think it's fun. It's I mean, admittedly, Malazan and Prince of Nothing do it in very different ways, but it's almost like darkly comedic in Malazan. But here, it's like full horror, creepy, familiar. You know, I loved it.
Yeah, the image of the doll scratching out the mark. What was it? The mark? Whatever they drew to keep him in.
The circle of protection or whatever it is, right? Yeah.
That was brilliant. Yeah. It almost made me feel bad for Cinemas because he didn't need to be there, but he because the Vati doll would have rescued Akamian anyway, so he just got hurt for nothing. Not that he knew that going in, but that was really unfortunate.
It was really sad. Yeah.
But it's just one of those things that's very sort of realistic.
Yeah.
Sort of like, how many times in life have you thought, oh fuck, I didn't need to do all that stuff that I did, but didn't turn out very well.
Yeah.
I really appreciated that sort of like subversive choice. You know, I mean, it reminds me of in Game of Thrones, you know, there's a sort of similar situation that happens in the TV show, not in the book series. That is something that I think it's done worse in the show. It just gets a little cartoonish, some of what happens, but I like that, where you have this like the classic breakout and it just doesn't work. It just doesn't. And then they're in even worse shit than they were in before. It is very compelling and heartbreaking.
Yeah, yeah. Especially because even though Akamian cares about Cinemas as much as he does, he couldn't, I think, because of the whole intermingling his consciousness with Ishwata thing, he couldn't bring himself to acknowledge that his friend, he had to do something for his friend. It's like it was really heartbreaking to read. What was it? Who is he, or who are you, or something, when
Yeah.
it's Akamian as Ishwata thinking, I don't need to worry about this person.
That was so cool too. I mean, it was heartbreaking, emotional, but like I also had a like, oh man, like Seiswatha really is in him. I mean,
Yeah.
I guess you can debate, like, is it just the memories? Like, does that influence his psychology, or is it like a spiritual thing where literally, like, if souls are real, is part of Seiswatha's soul in
Mm.
him? You know, that was super cool and freaky, you know, and sad, like you said, but just very interesting.
Yeah. It also makes you think that it's kind of like the Scarlet Spires, what the hell are they trying to do? Because I think they say it themselves that the Mandate Schoolmen are very good at torturing themselves with their dreams. What can they possibly do to make what they experience worse than what they dream about every night? But
I think they said it also. Like they've never been able to. Like they've done it many,
Yeah.
many times, and every time they just kill them at the end, right?
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Because they can't get it. So even Akimian was like, well, I guess I'm going to have to go through that because there's no other choice, right? He doesn't have a choice, and they don't really have a choice. It's just going to end up like that, right?
yeah, yeah. Except for the Vati doll. Who said its
Yeah.
name though? Did Akamian? It felt like its name was said much later than after he got captured. At least that's how I read the timeline, but could be wrong. Maybe it was just him.
What you mean, like to activate it?
Yeah, the first time we get the doll's POV from the library, it says that its name had been called, so it woke up and got out of the building. But
I don't remember.
but I felt like that happened a long time after Akamian's capture.
Mhm.
So I figured if it was Akamian who called it, that should have happened a while ago. But maybe I just have the timelines all messed up in my head.
I'd have to
remember.
reread it. Yeah.
But I think it's a very also nice chapter to see again and to reinforce how much stronger the sorcerers are than any other person. Like the Scarlet Spires are so much stronger than a normal person because it's so easy. Like it's like Cinemas. It's like how would he ever have managed? Like they also say that. It's like,
Yeah.
what did you think you were doing, pretty much? And then Akamian, the mandate is so much more strong than all these sorcerers, right? I don't. It says one mandate sorcerer is like 8 or something of
12
other sorcerers. Something. Yeah. It's pretty cool.
It is.
Is it also interesting that I don't know, but did you folk expect that Akamian would have some sort of healing magic? Maybe it doesn't extend to bringing lost body parts back, but it didn't. There was no attempt to try and heal Cinemas in any way. So either they don't have healing magic, or he wasn't able to use it on Cinemas.
That's an interesting thing to
Healing
point
magic.
out. Yeah, because he doesn't, right? That's interesting.
But have we seen any magic that's not destructive? I'm trying to think right now.
That's also a good point. Yeah, I don't know that we have.
Any
No one's-
useful magic? Any, like, I don't know, find water, create a dam, or you know what I mean?
like grow plants or something.
Yeah.
Have
we?
Yeah.
Rescue
yeah.
out of a tree. Yeah.
I think pretty much all counts of magic we've encountered have been setting things on fire in some way.
Yeah, really. For real.
Is that a property of magic, or is just a property of men and what they would do when having power? They would just use it for
burn things down.
Yeah.
I feel like it's got to at least be partially the magic, or at least the men's understanding of magic, because like healing all this stuff, if they could do it, would be so useful. You could get so rich. Like, if you're talking about in pursuit of power, like, it's not like healing someone isn't a useful thing, or growing crops. Like, these are wildly useful. Identifying, rare metals in the ground, like any number of things. But certainly they seem to be particularly good at destroying, which does speak to their character, but I think also must speak to at least their understanding of the magic to some degree. I mean, I guess it makes sense, you're in war, and I don't know, the healing thing, that's really interesting. That, we haven't seen any healing magic at all. Does it exist? I don't know.
And did we get any sense that performing the magic takes something out of the sorcerer? Like, they are more exhausted for it, or it feels like they have unlimited capacity, right?
It's not like a video game or something. Like, it doesn't seem like there's like a mana bar going down. Like, it kind of just seems like they can do whatever if they're capable of it. If they know the words, if they know how to tap into it.
Which is very cool. Makes them even more strong. Because a lot of the time you're like, oh, it's a video game. There need to be a balance, right? In real life, it doesn't need to be a balance. There's no balance here. It just ridiculously.
It is interesting to like how they compare, right? Like, the mandate stuff being just like tapping into like primal creation energies. And it seems like the Scarlet Spire's magics in particular seem to, like, who knows what's going on with the Sisharum or even the other schools, but the Scarlet Spire seem to like almost use like avatars, or like, I'm trying to like, because they always like summon dragon heads, to breathe fire and things like it's always animals and stuff. It's like they're like summoning like souls to like act through.
How I think about it in my mind is like the mandate knows like the math, knows the logic, the fundamental logic of magic, and they can speak it, while all the other schools have to use metaphors because they can't explain correctly the theory or whatever. Like, they can't be as pure, so they have to use metaphors. They have to use like, okay, the mandate is using logic, the other schools are using like poetry or something to do the magic. That's how I imagine in my mind.
Yeah, I like that. It's even called the I don't know if this is the word that Akamian uses, but he says it's the analog school of sorcery, right?
Yeah.
Using analogs and equivalents for doing the magic.
I think magic is like they describe like straight lines and geometries, very like pure sort of math stuff. That's how at least I imagine how it's sort of described, right?
The way the magic is written, I think, is so compelling, so interesting, so like colorful, and just like it's sometimes hard to imagine, but I like that it is so chaotic and destructive and potent, and just it feels very magical, like very arcane in a way that, particularly coming from, I think, a lot of times these days, not only is magic very systematized, but it's written in a very literal way. And I like you see it in Malazan too. Song of Ice and Fire, I feel like, frequently does it, although it's usually a little stricter about the effects, at least in terms of how they're described. But like describing the chaos, really leaning into like it feels otherworldly beyond, the story. Like it almost is sort of impossible to imagine it all, to take it all in.
So what did because we talked about Callus, like at least implying that he's the son of God. What was everyone's reaction when he was afraid?
Oh, he was afraid when he saw the Sisorim, right? Who he thought was his father.
When he was being chased, and I think he was talking to Surway or Espinen, and they could tell that it was the first time that he was scared.
Oh, I didn't buy that he was scared. I thought he made them think he was scared for some reason.
Yeah, that whole scene was really interesting. That everything from the birth to like the Sisharum spies, and that they have their own sex. That was an interesting reveal. that was something too that like before we ever met that guy, it seemed like Kellis like very confidently thought his father was one of the Sisharim, which I don't know if he just like made that assumption, but I felt like he didn't, or we didn't at least, have enough info to like really be confident about that. But he seemed really confident. But I mean, that confirmed it, right? Like his father is clearly large and in charge, at least over a sect of the Sisharim, which, whew. and they drink the Kool-Aid. I mean, they're the same way like the Zadunyani, Kellis's worshippers. They are willing to fall on their sword just to pass a message along.
And it's a whole sect of people, kind of like what a commune is afraid of creating in Kellis, right? He thinks that if he teaches Kellis the gnosis, that he'll be more powerful than Seshwata even. And well, the Sisarim are not as powerful as the Mandate schoolmen, but they are a lot more powerful than most Dunian, I'd imagine. And they've been taught the logos, whatever that means. Yeah.
But are they being taught the logos in a way that's like, oh, I'm telling you the logos so that I can manipulate you, or are they being taught the logos in actually being taught the logos? You know what I mean?
Oh, you think he's just giving them bits and pieces to make them think that he's bringing them in on something, but kind of like Kellis is doing with the whole sermons and being the warrior prophet.
Just like saying, oh, you're telling truths, but in a way to manipulate things, and you're not telling the whole truth. You're selecting certain parts for your own advantage.
Yeah.
And we're back. There we go.
Oh, okay. You dropped out for a second, Carl?
No, it looked, I mean, at least on my screen, Steve and Dan, you all disappeared for a bit.
Oh, interesting.
Sort of the logos trying to stop us.
The Dunian are listening in.
Oh, damn.
Yeah, I didn't think of that. That's a really cool idea. That, I mean, of course, that makes sense that you could twist something but it feels like the logos is something that Kellis believes in on a very fundamental level, that he, I don't know what basis I have to say this, but it feels like he thinks that it's incorruptible, right?
Yeah.
So to take that and actively corrupt it as that, yeah, that would be a whole
like a
other
reason to
level.
kill someone.
Yeah.
It is. That's an interesting idea. I think, I mean, he's clearly not perfectly teaching. I mean, how hard would it be, right? Like they raise the Dunian kids like as children. They brainwash them from a young age. They train them from a young age. So you get these grown-ass adults who have their own POVs, who worship, a god, and have their own faith and their own magic and philosophies. And then suddenly, you introduce this whole new world to them. They may think it's interesting. They may be attracted to it, but I don't know that they would like overnight be able to just click in. So even if he isn't corrupting it, I can see it being not because like the whole idea is it theoretically would liberate them of his influence, right? Like if you understand the logos, then you understand you're being played, and so you won't be played. And they definitely seemed more like the guy we met seemed more like the Zadunyani in that they seemed to be very worshipful of Moingus.
But maybe if he thinks that if they all think like him, they'll all want to do what he wants to do, because then they see the truth for whatever purpose they do have.
Right.
Maybe. Or maybe not. I don't know.
You do know.
I do know. But I don't want to say.
I'm very interested in Moingus.
Yeah.
Definitely.
But is it also possible, let's say someone tells you this, the Dunian philosophy, and you completely buy it, you completely believe in it. Like, would you be able to even do it, even if you really wanted?
No, that's what I was.
Right? Yeah. Well,
philosophy, that doesn't necessarily mean that they can separate themselves from the darkness that comes before.
Yeah.
I mean, we've seen Kellis, who is like a prodigy at it, has still like fallen into emotion once or twice.
Yeah.
I think it is very, I mean, the way he speaks about his father in his head, going back to that's not an emotionless being. That's someone who does feel some sort of connection to his father. You don't talk to your dad in your head if you don't feel connected in some way, you know? And that's the darkness that comes before. That's the thing he's supposed to be separated from. So that is not to say I think he isn't capable of killing his dad. I think he is, but clearly there are breaks in chips in his armor, and certain things sometimes leak through.
Maybe.
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 For someone who is as logic driven as he is, he made a lot of assumptions when he ran into that Caesarium.
Yeah.
I think he said he looked at this reflection of himself. I had a sinking moment where I'm like, Moengus is not Maithanet after all. I don't know, was that line just there to throw off all the readers for whatever theories they have about who Moengus is? But how, without even having a proper look at the guy, how do you get this big ass assumption that you're looking at your reflection, which he must have meant that as he's looking at someone who looks like him, his father. So that feels, so if it wasn't there just to misdirect the readers, that's a very emotionally charged thing for him to feel, right? Like he's finally coming face to face with his father.
Exactly.
Without even looking at him properly, he's jumping to conclusions. So that line stood out. I think that's interesting. So the actual
I mean, his whole assumption,
yeah,
right? That person was his father.
yeah,
and we get a description. The guy doesn't look like his dad. They're colored differently. They're like, Aryan. They're like, they're Norserai, right? They have blonde hair and blue eyes. And this guy was very much of this Isharam, darker of complexion, darker of hair. So he definitely was it was like a moment of hope or fear or any number of conflict. Like clearly I'm agreeing with you, Barsha, that like that was definitely an emotional moment, right? That was the darkness that comes before leaking in.
Maybe he's seeing the pattern of manipulation of these, like, there's something Dunyain happening here.
Right.
Like
No, I do.
right?
I agree. I think it's not completely without any logic, but he still made a lot of assumptions this is my dad.
But I think we've seen him do assumptions before, right? When he's not, because he can't have full information, so he's like, well, I have to gamble something, or some things I can't. Yeah, or he doesn't know, and he just has to assume, I think.
Right.
But those are conscious assumptions, I would think.
Yeah. Okay.
He's deciding that these are the assumptions I'll make to figure out what to do next. Versus here, it's just he's coming to conclusions. He's not really. Yeah. At least that's how I read that section. Yeah.
I read it the same way. It felt like him being unusually emotional. Not necessarily. He didn't even seem like he was like overly afraid so much as he just was. I mean, again, it almost felt like it was like hope. Like he I would have to reread the wording exactly, but like, again, that just like latching onto this idea that his father was here, and at last, they were going to have the confrontation. But beyond that, what was I going to say? It's just related to that. Oh, Maithanet. My new like branch of your theory, because I'm increasingly thinking that they're maybe not the same person. I'm increasingly thinking that maybe Moengus is in Shime.
Yeah.
Just because that sort of thing we haven't seemed to have been tricked about. Like all of that seems to be as straightforward as it has been. But maybe not. Again, maybe we're being misled. And I still love Maithanet as Moengus. But I'm thinking maybe, because clearly there is stuff going on with Maithanet. Maybe he is someone who's been taught the Logos by Moengus. Because we have like 30 plus years, right? So maybe he's a student of Moingus who then infiltrated, the Enrithi church and rose up and became essentially his agent at the very top of the ladder.
Yeah, that makes sense. And 30 years is enough that you could grab a child and bring them up to that level, like to address your point about they need to be indoctrinated when they're very young. And also that could be, my theory that maybe Maithanet is some other Dunyan. Um, Given how they reacted to the one Dunyan who went out into the world, that seemed unlikely. But knowing that he's trained others to be like him, sort of, maybe, that makes sense.
Well, I think the way that Mike's theory would have to work is that it's a different.
Did we lose him?
Maybe there was like some hidden other little group that existed, and they, I don't know, did whatever they did, and somehow one of them ended up becoming Maithanet. And like knows the logos. Maybe it works slightly differently. Like their view of it is slightly different. Because I agree. I don't think that it could have come from the sects that Kellis and Moingus came from, just because they seem to be pretty against the idea of you leaving. Basically.
Yeah.
not so hot on that.
So it could be a different Dunyan sect, or it could be one that Moingus himself trained, like you suggested. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
Cool. I like that.
Interesting.
Many theories. Do you think, question for Carl, and maybe we'll not look at these faces.
Yeah, I'm locking out.
Do you think we'll meet Moingus in the rest of this book?
No, next book.
Okay.
He's definitely a last book. He's going to be in Shime. They're going to meet in Shime. I think that's what we're building. We're not getting to Shime in this book. There's no way. We're too close to the end.
Okay.
We're getting
Fair
close,
enough.
but I would be shocked. I mean, that would be a crazy way to end it if he appears in like the last few pages, right? Like, if he appears, it'll be in the last few pages. That's I would bet on that. But I would. Book 3.
Yeah, for sure.
That makes sense. Did you what do you think the book is building towards in terms of the Kellis plotline? Because I think that's clearly the main story, right? It's set in the backdrop of the Holy War, but really what Kellis is up to is what we're building up to in the third book. So is that it? Just the final confrontation is going to be between Kellis and Moingus? Is that what you think we might be building towards? I'm scratching my head. I don't know what it is that we're going towards in the third book.
I think so. I increasingly feel like that is going to be the climax, and I think it's even possible that we'll meet Moingus early in book 3, and the rest of book 3 will be him and Kellis being more antagonists, not like directly, but like they're like forces, I mean, I don't know. There's so many ways. I'm sure it'll surprise me, like as it frequently has. But I mean, you're asking.
You like Star Wars, like son, join me in ruling the Empire.
Right. Like, there's gonna be some. But I mean, fuck. Maybe Moingus is dead. Like, who knows? That would be crazy. That would be a very anticlimactic, but maybe. I mean, if he's left a big legacy, then cool. Are you asking about the trilogy in general, or this book specifically, the climax?
The trilogy, because as far as I understand, the trilogy is supposed to stand on its own, so we're not waiting for anything to happen afterwards. So there are 3 threads, if you will, that we're following. There's the whole thing with the consult, the Kellis, V. Moingus, and the Holy War, which I don't really care about how the Holy War fares. They're going to end up in Shime. That's the whole final book. And I'm interested in the Kellis versus Moingus thread. If you're building up towards them meeting together as the final thing, like what is the purpose of that thread? Like, where is that going?
I'll put some speculations and theories down. One, I think the theory war, not the theory war, geez. The Holy War is, in fact, every Holy War is a theory war if you really think about it. Anyway, the Holy War, I think, will finish. It will end at Shime, and I think the Enrithi will win, just because that's what happened in the First Crusade. It's the only crusade that the Christians really actually won. And then I think Kellis will become king of Shime. Maybe not, but I kind of feel like that would make sense dramatically. I think he and Moingus will have a big confrontation. Like, because if you think of this structurally, right? So the prologue starts off with Kellis leaving home to find his father. So naturally, the ending is probably going to tie into that confrontation, right? The beginning of the story isn't about the consult. We don't really even get into the consult until we get to Akamian, which is admittedly like chapter 1. So I do think the consult will tie into things, but I don't think the consult is going to be like the big bad. I think Crow Guy is dead. I think Crow Guy is going to get killed probably by Kellis. I do not think he lives out the trilogy. They're gonna give us like some, he's a lieutenant who's gonna get like whacked. It's and then because we haven't met any of the like the sorcerers in the consult, so I don't think we're gonna get into their stuff really until the next 4 books. I think that's what that's about. As far as I know, it's called the Second Apocalypse. So, is that the whole series, or is that the next 4 books? Is that what it's called? I don't know if I should even be asking that because that's probably a spoiler. But
I think the whole series is Second Apocalypse, and the next 4 is the Aspect Emperor.
Okay, never mind then. I mean, I don't know.
Yeah.
I'm still maintain I don't think we're going to see a big confrontation with the consult. Like, we're clearly not in the apocalypse right now.
Or are we?
Well, I mean, we're maybe in like the early days. But like,
Dan throwing in his difficult question.
It'd be crazy if Spaceship Castle rises up and like suddenly next book is just about dealing with the apocalypse.
Maybe all that's happening is like the initial, when there's like a prophecy and there's like, oh, this thing is going to happen, that thing's going to happen, it's like the prelude or the initial parts of the apocalypse, right? Maybe this is what this war is, or maybe not.
I definitely could see, that's what I think this is. I think this is the road to the second apocalypse. I think we're seeing the foundation laid for what happens. I think the actual story of the apocalypse is the next books, which, as far as I know, have a satisfying ending on their own. I mean, that was one of the things I think Steve first said when we asked him in like our very first episode, is that like, while there's potentially more story to tell, there is a wrapping up. So I think that's what happens next time. And I think the focus here is the Holy War. And
gone again.
I think the consult is going to tie into it, but I don't think it's going to be like about defeating, Sauron. I don't think we're going to confrontation with the no god, right? Like, I don't even think. I think it's all Kellis and Moingus at the end of the day.
Do you think the no god will be reborn by the end of this trilogy?
No, I think that'll be the next series, because that would feel like too much of a cliffhanger for a trilogy that's supposed to be contained. I'm just like trying to think of this on like kind of a narrative structural level. That's where I'm basing this. It's the same thing with like, you think of the Holy War. The Holy War, while it's sort of the main plot thread, it really is kind of, in a sense, a vehicle for Kellis and Moingus's confrontation, which is the first thing we're introduced to. And I mean, at this point, I think it's very clear that Kellis is like the main protagonist, even if he's not our primary POV. Like, he's driving the story, and he's on the side of the Enrithi, or rather, they're unfortunately underneath him on his side. And then I think similarly, Moingus probably I think that's probably why we haven't seen more of the Kyanine as we've gone. As much as I wish we'd seen more, I think we haven't seen as much of them because they're more directly tied to Moingus, and Bakker doesn't want to reveal what Moingus's deal is yet. And I think he's one of their leaders and is basically doing what Kellis is doing, but with the Kyanine, their Fanim, their faith and everything.
Makes sense.
Sorry, I need to interrupt you a second because I need to go right now. So thanks for the discussion. It was great. And till next week.
Yeah.
And
Thanks.
bye, everyone.
Thanks for joining us, Dan. Bye.
Thanks. Bye.
Cool. I guess, what else did we not talk about? Esmenet and Survey and her interesting relationship with Kellis.
It's hard to read about. She's so in love with him. And she's beyond in love. She's obsessed. I like that she's like, again, that he's like liberated her in some aspects where she's finding this pride. But it's like, oh, it's bad.
Yeah.
It's so bad.
I don't know. A part of me, like, I don't know, if we did fractions with it, it'd be like 0.00001%. But a part of me thinks that Kellis might reciprocate her affections on some level. Like,
Oh, I don't think so at all.
Yeah, I know.
That's a really nice thought, but I do not. I have no. I don't think he respects her enough for it. Like, I mean, okay. It depends what we mean by that. Like, I don't feel like he feels romantically like attracted to her. You know, like I don't feel like he has that sort of like that bond, however you want to define it. I mean, certainly romance is cultural, but I think maybe he's getting some sort of affection for her in the same way he clearly has some sort of affection for Nair, enough that he spared Nair's life. So on that, I could maybe get on board with it. He's not necessarily aware of it, and he's actively trying to crush it, but maybe there's a little something there that I could get on board.
I think, yeah, in as much as Callus is capable of feeling any sort of attachment to anyone,
Right.
I think he might for Esmenet and Survey. But it's practically wishful thinking at this point, honestly. But
I think the key for me is that he would not hesitate. I still feel like to throw them under the bus if he felt he needed to. You know, like I don't feel like he would sacrifice for them.
Yeah. Did you buy what he told Survey when she asked him that the Sylvandi said that you gave me to him, and Kellis explains to her that he was sure that she would refuse, and that's why he felt comfortable doing that. Do you buy his explanation, or was he just making up excuses?
You know, I think he probably did think that through. I mean, I don't think that's why. I think he would have done it anyway. Like, I don't feel like he felt bad about it, but I do think he probably was aware that she would not go willingly. And that Nair in turn may refuse her and let her go. Certainly, I don't think like the way she interprets that is not the way that I interpreted that, right? Like it's not like, oh, I love you and you're so strong, I knew you would resist him, you know, like it's much more just like I thought through the actions of everyone, and I thought it was probably likely you were going to come back to me, and if you didn't, oh well, you know.
Oh well, that's the part that hurts, isn't it? If you didn't, oh well.
I'm curious about your thoughts, Steve, reading all of this, you know, these very difficult relationships, you know, as a rereader. Obviously you know where it all ends up. How has that been for you? It's hard to talk about.
I think I see more of the manipulation this time around. And Kellis is hard because you can't ever really trust him. Like you don't really ever know what he's doing or what his goals are, or if he really cares about someone or something. It's like he's not a person. He's like he has an end goal, and that's what his mind is on. So it's really hard, and you stay guessing with what is he really trying to do. And in this section, it almost seems like Surway and Kellis are like a couple, like they're giggling and walking together and talking and laughing but is that Kellis? Is it just in a means to an end, or does he really care about her?
Laughter is definitely not. I can't imagine Kellis genuinely laughing, like actually finding something funny. No way. That dude doesn't laugh. I mean, he laughs when he needs to laugh. He doesn't laugh because he like feels laughter. I don't believe it.
Yeah. He's manipulating the heck out of those two women. It is deeply disturbing to see. To at the very least think that that's what he's doing, because that's what we've been led to believe. We don't get to be in his head a lot when it's in. Actually, we don't know, I think, except for some early glimpses we got into how he feels about Survey, in the sense that how he intended to use her to get to Nair. We have no clue what he's up to with Esmenet.
No.
So, yeah.
I mean, with Surway, it felt like it was pretty clear she was his tool against Nair, right? To use to manipulate Nair. And then apparently other men too. Esmenet, yeah, I still have no idea. I can't wrap my head around it. I don't know what he's planning with her.
No. Yeah, and is she still a valid tool against Nair? I feel like Nair has sort of uh, reached Vairagya over that. I don't care about this anymore. Is that where he's at? So she's no longer a tool. It seems like so we're kind of where um where he is with Esmenet. Like what's she to him anymore? Although,
Well, with Surway, there's the baby, which is really
mm,
important. And
yeah,
then I do think she's still a tool for Nair, even if not as active as maybe she used to be to manipulate him. Like, I think he would come back for her. I don't know that Nair would come back for Kellis. I think if, like, Kellis was in danger, as much as Nair has, like, weird feelings for Kellis, I don't know that he would try to save Kellis. But I think he would try to save Surway, if that makes any sense.
yeah, yeah. So Akami, yeah. So we know Akamian feels a bunch of relief when he realizes that Kellis and Esmenet are possibly alive, and apparently he feels similar relief about Kellis being alive as he does about Esmenet. So how do you think he's going to feel when he finds out that he's lost Esmenet to Kellis?
With how he reacts to her sleeping with other men, it's got to hurt him. I think it's going to surprise him too, because I feel like he would think Kellis maybe would. I mean, I don't know. I feel like he may feel full of self-loathing and think, well, they thought I was dead, so it's okay. So he was comforting her. It's only natural, blah, blah, blah. Like, I could see him coming up with excuses, but I definitely think it's going to hurt. Like, he's not going to be happy about it or okay with it, you know?
Yeah, he has that moment in captivity when he's like, Esme, I need you to survive. And maybe the fact that she listened is going to hurt.
I think that's the big confrontation we're heading towards at the end of this book. I think that's going to be the emotional climax, is Akamian realizing that Esmenet is Kellis's now. Because I think it's going to come down. There's something, I just feel like dramatically it would make sense for Esmenet to have to choose between them and to choose Kellis. And for that to just like.
Yeah, that makes sense. Cool. I feel like those covered all the beats. Did you get confused like I did and think that Proyas may have been consulted because we had that scene with Nair when he was discovered, like when he apparently found him in the desert and then took care of him. And then the next time we hear about Proyas, it's that he's sick and nobody has seen him for a while. I thought Nair and Proyas were in different places, and so Proyas in the Holy War was replaced with a face person. But it turns out I was wrong. Nair found his way back to the Holy War after that. So.
No, I didn't have that thought. I there was someone as I was reading, I was like, did they just get replaced by one of the skin spies? I forget who it was. I did have like briefly a moment where one of the characters, I don't think it was a major character though. But no, Proyas, that's all that story. The story between Nair and Proyas is interesting. I didn't see that coming. They're an interesting duo.
Yeah. I wonder if we'll build up to a decent relationship between those two men, because Proyas, Nair thinks, I think, at some point in this book that Proyas is like a son. And here, when Nair finds Proyas in the desert, Proyas gets a closer look at Nair and he's like, he could be my father's age. So do you think we're getting into a pseudo father-son relationship here? Do you think that's coming at all, or is that just not relevant or significant?
Well, I mean, I think their relationship is significant. It's been built up. I mean, you don't save someone in the desert, and that doesn't mean like that's meaningful. And they've had a lot of scenes just one-on-one now. So I think the relationship absolutely is significant. And I think it definitely will continue to inform both of their characters going forward. I don't know where it'll end. I have no idea how that's going to go. Like, that's one of the things where it's like it's disconnected enough from the main story that I can't, like, I struggle to theorize about it.
Yeah.
Steve, you got quotes for us?
do.
Nice.
Yeah.
There's a couple that I thought were. It kind of fits into the whole Kellis thing. Page 452. No dog so loved its master as when it was beaten.
Yeah.
On 458, men often strike their sons to bruise their fathers.
Hmm.
That I thought was a really interesting quote. That one I remember hitting me like, oh, that's interesting. That's a curious idea.
Yeah. And there was one, and I honestly don't remember what this is referring to, but I felt like it was important. On 444, no more would she turn aside seed from her womb. And I think it's referencing Surway, but I don't remember what that was in reference to. But
No, I think that's Esmenet. She's no longer taking the like charm that kept her from getting pregnant. I think that she's now trying to have a kid with Kellis is the idea.
yeah, I wasn't.
Oh God.
Yeah.
Oh, no, Esme, no.
Yeah. Please don't. But it's the whole gun on the table thing, right? Like she's going to have a
Yeah,
child.
now something is gonna happen. Okay, but I will say, like, if this baby comes out all right, no way the next one is. Like, we're gonna get a dead baby somewhere, or like a miscarriage. Like, I just can't imagine. She's pretty old. Like I
mean,
think
she's under
still
30, I thought.
right. Like, I think she's still of an age where she can have a baby, no doubt. But like, the complications start to increase. You know, the risk of complications, and like, without modern medicine, no less. Like, I think there's a very real chance something goes wrong with a pregnancy she has. But I don't know. Maybe she'll have another, and there will be these two little princes, one of whom is actually related to Kellis, and one of whom is delusion baby.
I'm still waiting for the survey baby to become a demon baby in some form, because a consult person slept with her while she was carrying it.
Well, a little bit above on 444. Here's a quote: "You, Esmond, are the lens through which all burn. You're the womb of tribes and nations, the begetting fire. Your immortality, hope, and history. You're more than myth, more than scripture. You're the mother of all things. You, Esmenet, are the mother of more." So
This is the thing in response to which she thinks to herself that she wasn't going to reject seed from her womb anymore. But,
just like,
yeah.
oh man,
That
he's talked her up so much. It's just like, what an incredibly like powerful mythic thing to say about anyone, and then to know that he doesn't believe a word of it.
yeah.
You know, or if he does, like, is there a seed of truth that, like, no pun intended there, is that tying into his plans for her? You know, we'd speculated like maybe he wants to use her to like help lead a new like movement in the faith, you know, that kind of maybe is more just has its different values. I don't know. We'll see. It is interesting.
Yeah. This idea that we keep coming back to, that say this was so beautiful what Steve just read, and yet knowing who said it, in what context, and how they're probably going to misuse it, that taints it so much.
So much. Everything Kellis, he has the most like profound and like in a positive way. Like, he says some of like the nicest things in this series, and it's all fake. He doesn't mean a word of it. It's horrible.
There's so many there's so many things that Kellis says that any other book I'd probably highlight and do a bunch of like bright thread episodes on it. But now, what am I going to say about who said this? And like whoever's saying this doesn't believe a word of it himself. So the other thing that was interesting to me about it was, I don't think you were in that conversation, Carl, but we were talking about this whole like whether some of the things that we might relate to are a bit preachy. I forget the context in which we talked about it, but some of the things that um, I don't know, things that tell you how to be a better person, whatever, if they feel preachy or if you can just relate to it on a fundamental level. And one of the things that I think Dan was in that conversation, and we were talking about uh, what might differentiate whether it feels preachy or not, whether the author is doing the preaching or if it's just something a character's feeling that we can relate to, is if it's coming from different people versus like if different things that you're relating to is different characters are going through it or different characters are thinking through it, versus if there's one person who maybe represents the author or who maybe the author is really rooting for, who's doing all the talking of the things that you relate to or consider preachy. In this instance, I think a lot of the things that we relate to are coming from Kellis. I don't know about relate to, but like a lot of the things that I tend to appreciate come from Kellis, but the author's clearly not rooting for him. So where does that leave us in terms of like what to make of all of this?
Well, I think there's a lot in what you just said, like a lot to discuss there. From sort of a writerly point of view, certainly you want it to feel like it's something a character would actually say, like that makes sense for their point of view. So I think that's important that you have that verisimilitude where it's like, you're not going to have someone without reason in a wildly different culture than your own start espousing the values of your culture, right? You want it to make sense, the words coming out of the characters' mouths. And oftentimes, I think it is when you have different competing values, different philosophies, characters challenging each other on sort of those deeper levels, I think is often where you get the room to talk about some of those things without coming across as preaching, and where does that leave us with someone like Kellis? Like, how are we supposed to interpret it, I guess, is what you're asking, considering Kellis is the one saying it and Kellis is lying out of his ass.
Pretty much. I like a lot of the things that Kellis says. I even relate to some of the things that he says, but he's the one saying it and he doesn't believe it himself. So
I mean, I think it's an interesting question. I think it makes us wonder, about the nature of like truth and lies, and like, what does a truth mean if it is true but it's spoken by a liar, or someone who doesn't mean, it's I like, going back to Kellis basically inventing feminism, right? Like,
yeah,
I don't think the fact that he got Esme to like,
oh no,
saying we're wrong. I again, I don't even think Kellis thinks of women as lesser. I think he thinks of people as lesser, normal people who haven't embraced the logos, the shortest path. But it certainly is, it's an interesting idea, right? I think, I mean, to me, the most impactful part of it is it makes you want to be aware of the importance of motivation with individuals, and that they may say something. I mean, the classic thing to think about is like a politician, right? Who's like promising you something, like, do they really mean it? And it gets even beyond that with politicians who are like, can they even achieve the things,
Yeah.
Famously in campaigns, people will promise you the world and they'll give you a fraction of what they promise. And but it does make me certainly more cognizant of the fact that, like, just because someone is saying something to me, even something that's very touching or very meaningful or impactful, doesn't necessarily mean that they like embody or truly believe what they're saying. Liars exist, manipulators exist. That said, I also don't want to take this and suddenly start thinking everyone around me is Kellis. That would also be unhealthy. And is not a good way to live. And it's just not true, too. Most people are not like Kellis. And that's true, even true in this book series. Like, Kellis is unique among the people he's with. And in some ways, he's, it would be hard for someone, an ordinary and Rithi, to think of women the way Kellis starts talking about women. But, for someone like Kellis, it's just logical.
It's natural. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
At the same time, He's like a sociopath. He's like personal, like artificial sociopath.
Mm.
You know, I don't know that we know actually he wasn't born wrong. He had feelings, and he still does to some. I mean, it's not like sociopaths don't feel things, but you know, they don't have empathy.
Mm.
They struggle with it. I guess you can like train it, is my understanding, but to some extent. Anyway, that's a whole separate thing. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, these are all interesting ideas and questions you're talking about, Barsha. I think you could have a whole 2-hour conversation just talking about them, you know?
Um, yeah, we should do that. This is definitely something that keeps coming up, and I want to dig into a bit more.
If you want to do a video on your like channel or something doing that,
Yeah.
I mean, I'd be down to join in and talk about it. I think it's all very interesting.
Yeah, I like that. Let's set that up after we finish recording. But yeah, let's do that. I like that.
Cool.
Any other closing thoughts before we wrap up? Any other quotes? I liked some of the epigraphs. I don't have my book with me either, but I liked some of the epigraphs in this one.
Same.
When we talk about your book, Carl, I'd like to talk about epigraphs because I love this concept of epigraphs, and I'm curious how you come up with them, because it's a whole other style of writing, right? Like just the epigraphs is a separate style. So
that's again something that you could make a whole long video about.
Yeah.
It's because it is its own can of worms. I love epigraphs too. I got so excited when I opened The Darkness Comes Before and saw epigraphs. I was like, anytime I see epigraphs, I love it. Malazan, I'm actually more hit or miss with the epigraphs because so many of them are very esoteric poems that I find it's a little harder to parse sometimes.
Yeah. When I read it, I'm going to spend a lot of time on the epigraphs and poems, but yeah.
This series has really nailed it for me, though. That it just adds so much color to the world, whether it is just a poem or, you know, it's a big important piece of world building or something philosophical that makes you think and ties into the chapter. Yeah. Epigraphs are wonderful. I love epigraphs. Not everyone does. Some people they just skip them, and I think they're dumb.
Yeah.
But no, I know people can do whatever they want. I really enjoy a good epigraph, though.
Yeah, my favorites are still from Manifest Delusions.
I haven't read it. I got to.
So why I like it is because there's one quote usually from some big ass philosopher who has all these theories about how the world works. And then the second quote is from a second philosopher who thinks that the first one is a twat or an idiot.
Oh wait, that's amazing. That's a great just like premise there. That's hysterical. Okay, I definitely got to read this.
Yeah, and I think when we were reading that series, we were talking about like it's apparently recommended for people who like Prince of Nothing, and I'm beginning to see a lot of the similarities, which also I would like to talk about at some point. So yeah, we have topics for 3 follow-up conversations.
Hell yeah.
Cool. All right. So we'll meet back next week to discuss the final part of this book. Meanwhile, Steve, where can people find you and bug you about, I don't know, whatever their burning question of the day is? I tried to make a joke and failed.
I'm of no help if you have a burning question. I'm of zero help, so don't bother. But you can find me on PageChewing.com and join our forums. We have lots of stuff always going on there. So
absolutely.
Yes.
Hang out.
And Carl.
Also, you can find me on PageChewing or on social media at Carl D. Albert. And yeah, you can find my book, Truth of Crowns, online. Just, look it up. You can find it.
Yes, and I am, let me see, I'm on, almost there, I'm on page 400, I think. So,
Okay.
and let me tell you, it's been a little rough reading Carl's book and this book at the same time, because it's like a lot of heartbreak.
Don't get attached to anyone. It's
crazy things. It's like, wow, Carl, you're
it is upsetting. It is it gets worse.
okay.
It gets worse.
Wow, but it's lots of tragedy.
Yes. Yeah. All I will say is, the book ends Yeah, I'm not gonna say anything. I'm not gonna say anything. There's a lot that happens.
Okay.
Wow.
Are we going to want to hurl the book at you when we're done?
I hope so.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
I hope so. That would be a good reaction. I don't know. I don't know if that's that would be a reaction I'd be proud of. If you want to throw the book at me, and assuming it's not because you're like, this is the worst thing I've ever read, but because you felt angry at me, I would be pleased with that.
Hmm.
It is a big
Okay.
book, though, so be careful.
Yes, yeah, it's true. It could be a real weapon.
That's a point to it.
Good thing my aim is bad. So, but anyway, you can find me on the PageChewing forum, making bad jokes and talking and organizing a lot of read-alongs. And if you'd like to join us, as always, please consider joining the PageChewing forum. If you'd like to talk about the books either here or with us on the PageChewing forum. And thank you so much for listening. We'll see you in about a week. Bye.